Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. You know how sometimes a movie comes out and you hear buzz about it being the next big thing, a blockbuster that's gonna change Hollywood, and then poof, it just vanishes. Or worse, it becomes famous for being a spectacular disaster. Well, today we'll take a look at one of those flops, Disney's John Carter from 2012. Let's find out what the happened to John Carter. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Origins and the long road to adaptation. The movie John Carter is mainly based on a book called A Princess of Mars from 1912. This book was the very first in a series of 11 novels by Edgar Rice Burroughs that featured the hero John Carter, who travels between planets. The story actually started out in a magazine called The All Story, appearing in 6 monthly parts from February to July 1912, under the title Under the Moons of Mars. These magazine chapters were later put together and published as a full hardcover novel 5 years later. Back in 1931, the famous director Bob Clampett had a brilliant idea to turn A Princess of Mars into a full-length animated movie. Burroughs himself was really excited about this, realizing that a live-action film at the time wouldn't be able to truly capture his fantastical vision. So, he encouraged Clampett to create an original animated adventure for John Carter. In 1935, Clampett worked with Burroughs' son, John Coleman Burroughs, to bring this to life. They used techniques like rotoscoping, where they traced the movements of an athlete to make John Carter's powerful jumps in Martian gravity look believable. They also designed the unique green four-armed aliens to appear realistic. However, the test footage, created in 1936, didn't go over well with movie theatre owners across the US, especially in smaller towns. Many thought the idea of an Earthman on Mars was just too strange for audiences of that era. So, the series didn't get the green light. Clampett was offered to make an animated Tarzan series instead, but he turned it down. Clampett found it ironic because the Flash Gordon movie serial, which was quite similar and came out the same year, was a success. He guessed that MGM saw serials as kid-friendly matinee entertainment, while he intended John Carter's adventures for adults. Decades later, in the 1950s, stop-motion animation guru Ray Harryhausen showed interest in adapting the novels. But it was during the late 1980s that producers bought the film rights for Walt Disney Studios. They wanted to create a competitor to movies like the original Star Wars trilogy and Conan the Barbarian. Tom Cruise and director John McTiernan were considered for the project. The plan fell apart because John McTiernan realized that visual effects weren't advanced enough yet to properly bring the vision of Mars to life. Later, producer James Jacks was inspired to pursue the film rights after reading Harry Knowles' autobiography, which highly praised the John Carter of Mars series. Jacks, who had loved the books as a child, convinced Paramount Pictures to go after the rights, winning them after a bidding war with Columbia Pictures. In 2004, director Robert Rodriguez signed on to direct after Knowles showed him the script. Filming was scheduled to start in 2005, with Rodriguez planning to use the same all-digital stages he'd used for his film Sin City. He even wanted to hire Frank Frazetta, a renowned illustrator known for his fantasy art and work on Burroughs' stories, as a designer. Since Paramount needed a DGA-approved filmmaker, they brought in Kerry Conran to direct in 2004 and Aaron Kruger to rewrite the script. They even looked at the Australian outback as a filming location. Conran later left for undisclosed reasons, and Jon Favreau took over as director in October 2005. Jon Favreau and screenwriter Mark Fergus were determined to make their script faithful to Burroughs' novels. Unlike previous directors, John preferred practical effects and drew inspiration from the 1968 film Planet of the Apes, planning to use both makeup and CGI for the Tharks. However, in August 2006, Paramount decided not to renew the film rights, choosing instead to focus on its Star Trek franchise. They then went on to work on Marvel Studios' Iron Man. Finally, Andrew Stanton, the acclaimed director of Pixar hits like Finding Nemo and WALL-E, pushed Walt Disney Studios to reacquire the rights from the Burroughs estate. He explained that he had read the books as a kid and always wanted to see them on screen. Stanton then heavily lobbied Disney for the chance to direct the film, pitching it as Indiana Jones on Mars. The studio was initially unsure. Stanton had no experience directing live-action films, and he wanted to make the movie without stars who could guarantee an audience. The script was also seen as complicated and hard to follow. However, because Stanton had successfully overcome similar doubts with WALL-E and Finding Nemo, Disney approved him as director. Stanton mentioned that he was essentially loaned to Walt Disney Pictures because Pixar is a family-friendly brand, and John Carter, in his words, was not going to be an all-ages film. By 2008, the first draft for Part 1 of a planned John Carter film trilogy was finished, with the first film focusing solely on the original novel. After completing WALL-E, Stanton visited the Edgar Rice Burroughs Inc. archives in California for research. Jim Morris, general manager of Pixar, stated that they wanted the film to have a distinct look, moving away from Frank Frazetta's illustrations, which they both felt looked a bit old-fashioned. Stanton also noted that despite having less time for pre-production than his animated projects, the task felt relatively easy because he had read Burroughs' novels as a child and already had many scenes visualized in his head. The ambitious production, vision, challenges, and choices. Andrew Stanton decided to take on a live-action challenge with John Carter. It was an undertaking, both in terms of his vision and the actual filming. This movie ended up being one of the most expensive ever made at the time, with its initial production cost soaring to over $306 million. Though, thanks to a tax break from Britain, the final cost was brought down to about $263.7 million. They had some really technical and creative goals to make the alien world of Barsoom feel real. Taylor Kitsch played John Carter, with Lynn Collins as Princess Deja Thoris, and Willem Dafoe lending his voice and movements to the tall Thark Tars Tarkus. Visual effects were super important, and they even used physical models during the early planning stages to figure things out. To get the height right for the four-armed Tharks, actors like Willem Dafoe actually walked around on stilts. Stanton also worked really closely with Kitsch to make John Carter's incredible leaps, which happen because Mars has less gravity, look completely believable. For the music, they brought in Michael Giacchino, who's famous for his scores in shows like Lost and movies like Star Trek. Marketing missteps and Disney's strategy. The marketing for John Carter has been called a complete disaster by many, with the filmmakers themselves believing it was the main reason the movie didn't do well. Apparently, a new team of studio executives who didn't have much experience in movie marketing was in charge, and they just weren't as personally invested in the film's success as the people who actually made it. Plus, without anyone knowing at the time, Disney CEO Robert Iger was already talking to George Lucas about buying Lucasfilm and the Star Wars franchise. This basically removed any real reason for Disney to try and make John Carter a competing movie series. The person leading Walt Disney Studios marketing during all this was M.T. Carney, who wasn't from the film industry. She used to run a small marketing firm in New York and had no prior experience with movies. People who worked on the film said that director Andrew Stanton often turned down the studio's ideas, preferring his own. He even ignored criticism that using a cover of Led Zeppelin's Kashmir in a trailer, especially one aired during the Super Bowl, would make the film seem old-fashioned to the younger people they were trying to attract. Disney apparently got even more worried about John Carter's chances after another fantasy film, Conan the Barbarian, flopped in 2011. Like John Carter, Conan was based on a popular fantasy series that had been made into successful movies in the 1980s. But Lionsgate's version, costing $90 million and starring Jason Momoa, failed. Author Michael Chabon remembered reading a post from Conan's screenwriter Sean Hood, talking about how he dealt with the movie's lack of success, and for the first time, Chabon started to fear that John Carter might face the same fate. Even one of Disney's own franchise movies added to the executives' worries about John Carter. Pirates of the Caribbean On Stranger Tides, released in May 2011, did great at the cinema, becoming the third highest grossing film domestically that year and earning over $1 billion worldwide. However, because its budget reportedly went over $400 million, making it the most expensive film ever, its actual profits weren't as high as expected. This made Disney fear the same thing could happen with John Carter. By the time they did reshoots 4 months after On Stranger Tides, it was reported that John Carter would need to make at least $700 million globally, more than double its rising production costs, just to justify a sequel. Initially, everyone had high hopes for the film's success. The studio held a secret preview screening in mid-2011 in Portland, Oregon, before the reshoots. Afterward, many people rated the film as very good or excellent, giving it an average approval of 75%, which made the studio happy. The film's title was a point of contention, and there are different stories about who decided to change it and why. The movie is largely based on the first book, A Princess of Mars, but was originally going to be called John Carter of Mars. Stanton changed the title from the book's title early in 2011, but still, he planned to keep Mars in the title for any future movies in the series. The film's teaser, which was released in August 2011, was also considered poor. It mostly showed cool visuals from the movie, but there weren't many special effects or much action shown. As the premiere date got closer, some of the filmmakers weren't even aware of the negative press surrounding the movie. Mindel and Stanton later admitted they were clueless, because they were mostly only talking to the people they worked with in post-production. Collins said her staff kept that information from her, tracking data, which comes from long-term surveys of likely moviegoers to predict how interested they are in seeing a new movie and what its opening weekend box office will be, came back to Disney in mid-February and was shared internally and externally. Nikki Fink from Deadline Hollywood reported that the numbers pointed to a serious failure. Barely half the potential audience knew about the film. Only 27% said they were interested in seeing it, and a tiny 3% said it would be their top choice that weekend. An executive from a rival studio told Nikki Fink that the demographic data, combined with the shocking tracking for such an expensive film, showed that women in particular have flat out rejected the film. Nikki reported hearing estimates of a loss around $100 million, but noted that low numbers had been expected for a while, as Disney's own internal surveys had been showing them. Disney told her that the Super Bowl ad had given the film an expected pop of awareness, and that the studio was still committed to a full push before the release.
Jump for me. Enough! There will be time for playfulness later.
Release, reception, and box office disaster. The grand premiere for John Carter in late February wasn't held at Disney's usual fancy El Capitan Theatre in Hollywood. Instead, they chose the Regal's LA Live Theatre in downtown Los Angeles, which was seen as an odd choice for a major Disney movie. A press release from Disney emphasized that the film would be shown in 3D on a 70-foot screen to 800 people, including the cast, crew, executives, critics, fan club members, and contest winners. In the week after the film's release, industry insiders suggested 2 reasons why John Carter might have struggled, regardless of how good the movie itself was or how it was marketed. One idea was that newer, popular franchises like Star Wars had already used many of the ideas from Burroughs' original books, which were written a century ago. This might have left people feeling that there wasn't anything new or exciting in a modern adaptation of his work. A week before the film's release, Disney lifted the embargo on reviews. The film received a 52% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 239 reviews, with an average score of 5.80 out of 10. The consensus there stated that John Carter looks terrific and is quite thrilling, but it suffered from pacing issues and weird plot points. On Metacritic, which gives a weighted average score, the film got a 51 out of 100 based on 43 reviews, indicating mixed or average reviews. Behind the scenes, What went wrong? Even though Disney had really high hopes for John Carter to be a massive hit, it ended up losing so much money that the company actually fired its studio head. Despite having an exciting adventure, amazing visual effects, a great cast, and the potential to kick off a whole series of movies, with plans for John Carter 2 and 3 already scrapped, the film was a huge letdown. It needed to earn more than double its massive production budget just to break even, but it actually hurt Disney's reputation. Not only did they have to let go of their studio chief, but they also took a financial punch that impacted their profits for years afterward. John Carter is still Disney's biggest financial tragedy to date. Its production budget initially swelled to an incredible $306.6 million. Even with a British tax break bringing that down to $263.7 million, that figure didn't even include the $100 million Disney spent on just advertising the movie. According to Box Office Mojo, John Carter only made about $73 million in the US and $211 million internationally. If you do the math, it barely made about $21 million in profit from ticket sales. But once you factor in the marketing budget, the money paid for the rights to the story, and all the distribution costs, Disney lost a staggering $200 million. As a direct result of John Carter not performing well, Disney's studio chief at the time, Rich Ross, resigned that same year. He took the blame for John Carter and several other movies that bombed. Taylor Kitsch's acting career, which was supposed to skyrocket just like John Carter could jump on Mars, never quite recovered. All the planned sequels for John Carter that would have brought exciting new stories, along with Disney toys, video games, books, and even theme park rides, completely vanished. John Carter had a budget that could rival Avatar, but Avatar went on to earn over $2 billion worldwide. Disney's own sprawling space fantasy just couldn't compete. It's hard to imagine now, but there was a time when Disney was hesitant to make huge blockbuster films. John Carter made the entire genre feel risky for them for several years. Disney eventually gave up the rights to John Carter in 2014. Given all the success and money they're making from their live-action remakes these days, it would have been interesting to see if the film could have gotten a second chance to be better. Aftermath, fallout, and legacy. In September 2014, when studio president Alan Bergman was asked at a conference if Disney had managed to get back some of the money lost on The Lone Ranger and John Carter through later releases or other ways of making money, he responded, "I'm going to answer that question honestly and tell you no. It didn't get that much better. We did lose that much money on those movies." The night after the premiere, Lynn Collins, the film's female lead, says she was at another promotional event when her manager told her she would just have to disappear for a while because of the growing perception about the movie. She felt it was unfair and sexist that she, as the female lead, should suffer, while Taylor Kitsch went on to make Battleship, another sci-fi film that also flopped 2 months after John Carter. A year later, she fired not just her manager, but her entire team of representatives.
Oh. Well, that explains everything then.
Marvelous verdict. So there you have it, a film that had all the ingredients for success, a rich source material, visuals, and a director with a golden touch from Pixar, but somehow managed to alienate audiences and lose Disney an estimated $200 million. What were your thoughts on it? And what do you think was the biggest reason for its failure? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.